Good afternoon, everyone. It's Gord Isman here, and welcome. Today I have a very special guest, and this cool dude, Todd.LIVE, who I met at the Vid Summit in the last year. I had the pleasure of meeting him amongst a whole bunch of great people at Vid Summit, and it was a great experience there. And what's very interesting about Todd is that he's very active in the universe of live streaming. And today we're going to chat about how small business can use live streaming to help their business grow. Now, Todd is very active in both podcasting and live streaming, so we're going to be crossing over both kinds of subjects because, you'll see how he's utilizing them to help it with his brand and get his message out there. And we're going to learn some great tips from him. And I would, love to welcome Todd.LIVE. How are you, Todd?
Dude, Gord, I'm so happy to be here. I'm having a great day, and your broadcast is a lot of the reason why my day is so great today. And part of that is also the Southern California weather we're having. It's awesome out today. I've been fortunate enough to spend a little time outside, and now I'm ready to go on live video.
Oh, that's awesome. It's cooking here in Toronto where I am. Finally, spring has arrived, but there's still a lot of snow melting, so that sound of the water running down the streets is music to my ears.
Right.
Yeah. So Todd, you have a lot of experience in the entrepreneurial space, and now you're a very active creator and communicator online through podcasts and live stream. Can you share a bit about your background and sort of like how you're qualified to speak on live streaming, and tell us about what are the few shows, and just a little backstory about how you are present where you are today?
Yeah. So I've been an entrepreneur all my life. Since I was 13, I had a 10-speed bike that was stolen from me. And at the time, my parents couldn't afford to replace it. So I saw the lawnmower sitting there, and I was like, Mom, can I, strike up deals with neighbors and see if anybody wants their lawn mowed for the summer so I can save up for the bike? And I got that done in about 3 weeks. I think I earned enough for a bike. And I've always been wheeling and dealing ever since. I would knock on doors and talk to adults at 13 years old and strike up a deal, look over the yard and, work out a deal that was work for both of us. And that's where I got my start. I went to college just like everybody did coming out of high school. I got involved in a retail operation and a real estate deal. And that, I just jumped right into having 14 or 15 employees. And so I already had some management experience working with my mom, who was a caterer, but, I've always been busy. When I decided to shut that business down and go to law school, which was, I don't know that it was a mistake, but I wouldn't do it now knowing what I know about the internet. And the internet didn't exist in the capacity that it does today back then. This was like 1998. So I went to law school, and all during law school, I was selling things on Amazon and selling things on eBay. I sold near $1 million worth of stuff on eBay over 10 years, playing the news cycle and buying things. So I got a taste of internet commerce during those years, and working with people on the internet and finding ways to make money. Once I got out of law school and started practicing law, I was still doing the eBay and the Amazon hustle on the side. I enjoyed that more than practicing law. Because it allowed me to define my own terms and do things on my own and make decisions on my own, where when I was practicing law, somebody was handing me case files and saying, this is what you can work on today. And I hated that kind of a grind. I like to choose what I get involved in and have a little more control over my time. I lucked out and got involved in a manufacturing business in 2008 that I still run today. It's a one-man show. And it afforded me and my wife both the ability to get out of our day jobs. And in the meantime, I've done various online entrepreneurial endeavors, quite a few flops. I mean, not flops in the sense that I lost a lot of money and had to regroup, but just flops in they just didn't ever materialize to where I wanted them to go. And I just kind of moved on. I decided that this isn't worth the fight. I'm going to, would take things that I had learned from doing this stuff on the internet, and parlay it into new adventures. When I got into live video, I had a business that I had started to help people get out of the 9-to-5 job, and I called it Divorce the Workforce. And I trademarked that name. Everybody loves the name, and I may still use it at some point because it kind of jives with a lot of what I'm doing. But to promote Divorce the Workforce, I got into two things. I got into podcasting and I got into live video. And I found myself constantly talking about podcasting and live video and not talking about divorcing the workforce and getting out of the day job. So I wasn't really promoting the brand with the tech. I was just kind of talking about the tech and learning. And
so when was that, Todd? When was that?
This would have been about 3 years ago. I think late 2015. Maybe it was 2016 that I started podcasting and getting into live video. I was sick one day with the flu, or probably a week. But I was laying in bed one day, and Gary Vaynerchuk came on, and he did what he called the Super 8, and it was to promote the Ask Gary V book that came out a few years ago. And I laid in bed for 8 hours and watched it. And the Super 8, the whole idea was he was on 8 different platforms for 8 hours. And he was promoting his book and getting people to buy stacks of his book for shout outs and all this other kind of stuff. And I was just totally mesmerized by the ability to go live on 8 different platforms, read 8 different audiences, and interact with them in real time and sell stuff. And so I decided to start building a live video studio. And the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to multicast. And I figured I need to buy 3 iPads. I have a phone. So that's going to allow me to go to 4 places. And then I discovered OBS, and I figured now I can go to even more places because I can use OBS to go out to a few places. I can use the iPads. I can use the phone. And I started figuring out tech. And what I quickly realized between my podcasting efforts at the time and the live video tech was that I became a very, somewhat of an audio snob. Like I really want high quality audio at all times. And when I don't get it, I get really frustrated.
Right.
And from time to time that happens. I was doing a live video the other day, and there was a little static issue on somebody else's feed. And I actually found that I think the source was in my studio, but those little things bother me. And I quickly, for a while it ate me up. It consumed me. I wouldn't go live because I had a video problem, or I wouldn't go live because I had an audio problem. And that was a big mistake looking back. I should have been going live and letting people, go along with me during these struggles. Maybe somebody would have had some advice, but I just decided to kind of shut the world off and solve these things and go live when I knew it was, I had 4 aces, right?
Right.
So, I've grown a lot since then. I don't sweat the small stuff, even though I do strive for perfection every single time. I know that you strive for perfection as well. But you can't let it go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just grateful that today I didn't have any mishaps to get started like I had on the last weekend, because, like you said to me once that, anything can happen any day, and you can't rationalize why something is all of a sudden off, and just, trying not to sweat it is still tough for me. I guess I'm that early at it. But I'm curious to know, because you do this like TriCasting, and I think you're aiming to do quadcasting. When did you decide to introduce the live streaming, and what do you think that adds for the small business on top of the podcasting in terms of helping to differentiate them or getting their presence known, or in whatever way they're going to apply using live? Like, what triggered you that I got to get there into the live beyond the podcasting, or complementing it all?
Well, yeah, they're 2 separate. I think it's really important to look at them separately. I mean, I do not. I mean, even though I record a lot of my live videos for a podcast, they're totally separate things to me. Okay. I podcast. I'm becoming somewhat of a prolific podcaster. I've had 4 podcasts. The first one, which is where I cut my teeth, Divorce the Workforce, I did, I think, 39 episodes. They were interview style. They were once a week. They'd be about an hour long. I really sweated bullets over prepping for every show, making sure I had every question, I studied the people for 3 or 4 hours. If I was going to have you on, or Ross Brand, or whoever come on, I did a lot of studying. And I really sweated that show, and I learned a lot, and I enjoyed that show. It was a fantastic show. And a lot of people that have listened to it, who are big names or big broadcasters, have reached out and told me that they really enjoyed the show and wish I would continue it. But that's where I got my start. My second show was called Create and Engage with Todd.LIVE. And I feel like I casted a really wide net, because I was trying to mix live video and podcasting in one thing.
Right.
And It was my first stab at it, and I didn't like it. It just didn't work for me. It was a 1 hour. It was pretty much the Divorce the Workforce, except for live video and podcasts. And it was called Create and Engage. I didn't like it. It went like 10 episodes. You can still find it on iTunes if you want to go back and listen to it. I had Chris Strubb and a few other great people on there. And I set that off. And then I had about 6 months where I didn't podcast at all until Vid Summit, or right around Vid Summit, 2017. And, you know, I had already bought an Alexa, and I knew that podcasts were popping up on Alexa. And when I heard Gary Vaynerchuk talk about the power of podcasting in general and how the Alexa and Google Play and the Google devices and all these other devices are going to make podcasting have like kind of like a second big wave. Like,
right.
He even said that podcasting has not even seen its best days yet because of all these devices coming out. He said that if you have a podcast today, it's kind of like having beachfront real estate in Malibu, you know, 500 years ago, before people even showed up in California, and staking a claim to that real estate. So he you know, and I don't know how true that's going to be, but I do think he has a point that all these audio devices that people are putting everywhere makes it easy to discover content and enjoy different kinds of content on these devices in ways that they never have been able to do before. So I had been kicking around the podcasting idea already, getting back into it. And so late last year, I decided to do a live video podcast, which is called Entrepreneur Live Video. And it's a daily 15-minute thing. 5 or 6 days a week, it's 15 minutes. 1 day a week, there's a live video component, or a recording of a live video every Wednesday, where I interview somebody, kind of like in the style I did with Divorce the Workforce and Create and Engage. And then a month later, I started one on Instagram marketing, and it's a daily, same format, 5 to 15 minutes a day, Instagram marketing, with 1 day a week being Wednesday, where I drop a pre-recorded audio clip from a live video that I did. And so, you know, I think of them as different things. And actually, I think of them as different things probably because when I got started, I built 2 studios.
Oh,
I had the space to build 2 studios. I built a podcast studio and I built a live video studio. And almost all the equipment was the same in both studios, but I was afraid to mix them because I didn't know tech. I'm not a tech wizard. I didn't grow up learning this stuff. A lot of this stuff is brand new to me over the last 2 or 3 years. So I was very scared to intermingle the live video and the podcasting. So I had the podcast studio. I have 2 of these mics. I've got 2 mixers. I've got 2 of everything because I had a podcast and I had a live video. One day I thought, okay, I'm going to combine the 2 studios and have 1 studio where everything can be done. And I rolled up my sleeves and I unplugged everything and kind of scattered it in this room and started piecing it together and figuring it out, and had no help at all.
Yeah.
And I combined my podcast and live video studio so that I can record my live videos for podcast should I desire. And that's what I do. And I do it because I want podcast people, hopefully, to come over to the live videos. And I want the live video people to find it on podcast. It's all part of my repurposing and cross-pollination strategy so that I'm at more places. If I do one broadcast, I'm in, you know, first of all, if I do one broadcast, most of the time I'm on YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope. So I'm in 3 places for the one live video. And then in replay, I'm on I'm on all 3 on replay because Periscope has the replay too. Even though it's worthless, it's there. But then I'm also in an audio format on, you know what, Amazon, Alexa, Google, all the Google devices, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify. I think I'm on iHeartRadio. I can't remember. And then when you're on all these places, there's other places that will pull your RSS feed and put you on their players. So I don't know how many dozens of players that you can find my content, but you know, it's just repurposing and cross-pollination. And it's just the whole strategy of trying to get, you know, you throw one stone up in the air and you try to hit as many birds as you can. Some of the birds you hit might not be very effective. I mean, there might be some platforms where, you know, I'm not gaining any traction because it's not, the content might not be tailored for that particular platform.
Right.
But it doesn't take any work, and it's all just like an RSS feed that just shoots it out and it's there. Who cares? It's there.
And I must say, I've gotten to go through part of the slam dunk course that you have to help educate people on how to set up their whole environment. And I guess you obviously described that now that you've integrated all of the gear to serve both podcasting and live streaming, you actually created a course to show people and educate them. And I've learned some new interesting nuances about all the dimensions involved in actually doing your tri-casting and simulcasting. And it can be quite involved and intimidating. And you go through a lot of detail, which I found to be very helpful, because I'm the kind of person, like, I got to know, like, why do I need to go through and do all of these things? And you actually explain it very well. So I recommend to people, it's a great resource to learn. If you want to dive into do it yourself, Todd carries you through all the details, and it's quite helpful. So
well,
I just wanted to share that.
Thank you for the shout out on the course. It's called Slam Dunk Studio, folks. You can find it at Todd.LIVE. My goal with the course was to give people the kind of education that I've given myself. Okay. Mm-hmm. Look, I could give you a PDF full of 100 pages that give you all the equipment that I have and all the arrows showing you how to plug it all in, and then you can kind of figure it out. But, you know, if I did that, you're not learning the why and the how and the alternatives and the, you know, I pour my, as you've seen in the videos, I might belabor some parts in those videos, but, you know, I really try to give it my all to my experience. It took me 2.5 years to build my studio and figure all this stuff out. Mm-hmm. And I try to pour it all into that, in that series, so that you can become a better broadcaster and you can become somebody who knows what they're doing with this equipment, so that when problems arise, you know how to solve the problems. Or if new tech comes along, you're going to know how to integrate it, because you know how the tech that you've got in front of you works, and you know why it works and how it works and how it doesn't work. I mean, there's certain ways you would configure it that don't work. And I go into those sorts of things. So I'm really giving you, you know, more than, like, you know, I could teach you, again, just how to build a studio, and then you turn on a few switches and you got to figure it out on your own after that. But I try to give you the how and the why, so that you have the confidence to toy around with it yourself. Mm-hmm. And come to, you know, you may even start building onto what, like, if you did my course and built my exact studio, there may be some things that you want to do that I don't cover, that I haven't ever done. And you're like, well, hell, I've got a good enough education now. I can add something. And if I don't like it, I can remove it. And I'm comfortable moving the wires around and trying.
I think that's very true. I get that feeling when going through the material, because I'm learning the foundation and the basics, so that I understand the decision making, the quality level, all of those things come together, so that when I look at alternatives, you know, I'll be able to assess them. And I think that's very important, especially for someone like myself, because, you know, I'm a techie guy and I love to know all the details, but I find it so frustrating to learn through just researching online alone, watching some videos, going through Amazon. And like you said, you went through all kinds of experiments. I buy splitter cables just to go into to use my phone, to use a separate mic and my headphones, and half the things don't work. And you have to have, you know, the right one that will work with your unit and understand what's the features you're looking for in the adapter for it to work out, you know. So there's so many places to trip up, and you've gone through that, and you share those lessons in the course, which I find very, very, very helpful. And I wanted to ask, so as a small business owner, how, like, you know, if you're a product company, I mean, how do you balance between the effort to do something like build community versus selling? I mean, isn't it you know, how should we be using live streaming as a, like, if you can contrast between like a solopreneur and maybe, you know, a small company, a solopreneur like a business coach, or someone like myself, you know, educating people on video and how to succeed in YouTube and stuff like that, versus like a small business which has a bunch of employees, or maybe a retail establishment. So like, how should we be thinking to apply live streaming to our business? You know, I see it as there's a large part of community and products and services as another sort of like a split.
Well, I think that, first of all, no matter what you're promoting, doing, whatever your mission, your message is, live video is all about community, period. Okay. That's where it really begins and ends. And you want to build a community. You want to focus on building a community. So you're going to want to broadcast consistently. You're going to want to broadcast decent quality content. It doesn't have to be a slam dunk studio. It doesn't have to be perfect. but it needs to be nice. It needs to be, it needs to be presentable. And I think that what your mission is or what your business is will kind of dictate how fancy or what it needs to be. But, it's all about building community, and by building community, you're naturally going to sell. Right. And I know that there's a lot of business people out there who are not going to like that answer. They want to be able to go online and just start selling. And you can do that and you might have some success, but you're going to have a lot more success if you're building community around your brand. And I interviewed recently Aaron Roth from Archon Mounts. Mm-hmm. And now he's in a really unique position because his products actually serve the live streaming community. Right. They use it and they promote it. And look, if you have a business and let's say you own a coffee shop and you want to use live video to promote your coffee shop, you're not going to have the ability to do what Aaron does with Archon Mounts, because he serves the community that's actually using this tech, and they need his products to make their lives easier as a live streamer. So it's a very unique situation with Aaron, but Aaron's able to penetrate various communities and build products for them to use, and they use them. They shout out to him. He shouts out to them. Yeah. He actually promotes them more than he promotes his product.
Yeah, in fact, if I understand it correctly, they've taken the path of educating people on live streaming and what it can do for their brands and to build community, and just naturally the interest in Archon Mount products would flow from that, because if people are inspired now to bring that into their business and to help connect with the people online, it's a natural fit. So it's actually I don't like the word generic, but a more all-encompassing way of getting our Archon Mounts out there to be known by actually empowering people to be live streamers to help their business, right?
Yes, I agree with that completely. It just, I mean, he's just in a very unique business. Now let's say you own a coffee shop though, and you want to promote your business with live video, and you want, of course, your goal is more sales. But if you make the goal about community, the next question becomes, what do you do to build the community? You have to be a good storyteller. So let's say that your mission at the end of the day is to sell, 1,000 cups of coffee in a day. Well, you could do that without telling people, hey, come buy my coffee today, or we're running a special 50 cents off if you watch the video and come in. You don't have to do all that. What you do is you just do live, and you could do this with your phone. I mean, I think something like this example, a coffee shop, you could do this with your phone. You don't even need a big studio or anything, but what you do is you showcase every day what you can. So you can maybe do behind the scenes, behind the counter, what's going on in the day to day. Maybe have some of your employees tell stories about working there, or maybe something that made their day nice, or maybe something they did that made someone else's day nice. If you're lucky, maybe you can interview some customers and see what they think. You could, here you got a load of special coffee beans, and you've got for 2 weeks, you're going to have this really unique coffee that, no one else in town's going to have. Maybe maybe you can find out some backstory to that coffee, like it came from Nicaragua and it came from the special farm, and the guy that runs the farm, maybe it's, it's solar powered. So it's going to appeal to the people that are into protecting the environment. And you can weave the story around this coffee getting to your location, and with the trouble and the story of the grower and the guy, whatever. And you could tell the story about this coffee and what's going to happen. People are going to be like, boy, that's a really interesting cup of coffee. I'm going to have to stop by there and try that. Wow. What a neat thing. And so go ahead.
I was going to say, and I find that interesting because, I'm building a YouTube channel, and it's all about how to on things like video editing, video marketing, and YouTube. But at the same time, when I try to work things in that are to promote me specifically, I find it frustrating to think about how to weave story in and into my videos, because I want to jam it full of value and everything. And that's why I think using the live streaming as a complement for people to get to know me through our discussions like this, or if I'm a guest on someone else's podcast or live stream, I'm beginning to appreciate that it's so much more important because people really want to connect with you and what's behind the brand. And that's why I hear a lot about, like you're saying, that's sort of like backstory, and then behind the scenes stuff, and getting to see the kind of cool people that may work at your company, and getting people to understand, the entity at another level, at a personal, at a humane level, right?
Yeah, I agree. And you know, you could do things like I'm working on a business or a new product right now, and it's going to teach people how to do podcasts within Instagram Live and send professional audio in. The downside is if your guest doesn't have professional audio, you can pull the audio out, but it won't be professional.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a real hard thing to send audio in and pull audio out to record for a podcast. So look, I could do a hard sell and say, hey, everybody go sign up on my website for my newsletter. And when this product comes out, you'll be notified. And you know, maybe the first people are going to get at a special rate, or maybe there will be a week where it's, you know, half off or something like that. And that's a hard sell. Now, otherwise, what I could do is I could do a lot of live videos where I check in on my crowd and I'm talking about, you know, I'm building this new course and my equipment's not working right. And I've got a headache and I got to take my kid to baseball practice. And you know, if you've ever built a course before, you know how hard it is to get focused and get your head in the game.
Oh, yeah.
and so you're talking about the course indirectly constantly.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm working on it and I'm a week behind, but I'm hoping next week I'll have some news for you guys about the course. I know some of you have already expressed interest in the course. And, you know, you just kind of weave this theme that I'm building a course.
Yep.
And you're talking about the trials and tribulations of building the course.
Yeah. And this is a great point because it's so apropos for me right now, Todd, because after the YouTube Partner Program qualification changes where they upped it to 4,000 hours and I needed 1,000 hours in that last month, I did my challenge. And since then, I've been telling people I'm working on my course to share all the cool stuff that I learned through there. And it makes me accountable. It builds some anticipation, but more than anything, it's pressuring me on the accountability thing because I haven't delivered. So people are seeing I'm struggling too, and I'm okay to share that because you know the you know that barrier I may need to crack may be something someone else does too. And you know, just because I'm a creator sitting here and sharing this conversation doesn't mean I don't have the same kind of struggles. You know.
Yeah, and you just find ways to plant the seeds that, hey, you're working on this, or hey, you're doing this. And you know, if I do a live video, like I did an impromptu live video a few minutes ago, and the only thing that I promoted was my podcast. I didn't promote any products. And you know, in promoting my podcast, I shared with the crowd a little bit about the fact that I was recording some today for the month of May, and why I record in advance, and some of the reasons that, you know, that I record in advance. Like it makes my life easier. It makes it easier to batch the content and get, I record all at once and then I edit all at once and then I upload it all at once. And that way I spend less time on it rather than one episode, you know, record, edit, upload, record, edit, upload. That's slower. So it's kind of like assembly line content production so that I spend less time doing it. And by talking about that, I'm talking about my podcasts, and somebody might be, oh, maybe I should go check out Todd's podcast today. So I'm not saying, hey, go check it out. I'm talking about the trials and tribulations of and the hard work that goes into it. And I think it piques people's curiosity indirectly. I mean, I think there's a time and a place for a hard sale for everybody. I mean, I don't think
there's anything wrong with having a call to action at some point. I mean, if you're bringing a lot of value to the community, and I guess, you know, it's about managing the subtlety in the way you introduce it. But I love the suggestions that you're making, because you're doing a lot of your stuff every day or every week now, and you're so regular on that it's become like it's just a habit. You're sharing at another level that's coming naturally to you. And speaking of building community, and I haven't yet recognized, although I've keyed into the chat a few times, I just want to thank a lot of the great people that are here. There's Joe Roderick, Mike, my buddy Mike, Crypto Cruising, Self-Publishing with Dale Roberts, Check It Media, Shakib, Michael Daniels. It's great to all see you here, and Michael, thank you very much for that nice super chat, and Rod Shrimp, I don't know if you're still here, but thank you all for joining us. And sorry, Todd, I jumped in there. I'm realizing I'm learning, and as we're talking about community, to be better at that. And so today I actually keyed in a few things into chat, so which is a change for me to be able to juggle that. So I'm kind of excited that I was able to do a bit of that. I want to continue on that point where you're at, because this gets into the other angle of the concept of fluff. like I've heard you talk about that a bit on your podcast, and once you gave a sample of a Coke Pepsi rant, and it got a lot of interesting engagement. But when you're, subtly managing as a brand or a small business, and you're talking about, some of those things about your experiences with your product or your service that you're building or working on to come out with, when you get into the pure human interest side of things, like, how do you feel about that in terms of, do you feel it's awkward that you're consuming people's time, or do you think it's important? What are people love it. People love it. So people love it. Elaborate a bit on that?
And I'll answer that, but I wanted to shout out to Mike. He says Todd uses the curiosity suggestion factor. Want to know more. Great idea, Mike. I don't know if I don't know exactly what more you'd want if you want to get more specific, but feel free. But you can also, folks out there watching, you can private message me at Todd.LIVE on Instagram. I treat Instagram private messaging like it's a text message. So I'm there very much. And if you want to reach out to me, I will answer you in very short order. I won't leave you hanging, because that's where I communicate with people out there. Going to your question about fluff sales. Okay. So I teach, I teach live video and I teach Instagram, and both of them are great for fluff. In fact, there's a big crossover, and Instagram stories is not technically live. Okay. Yeah. You record it and then you send it up, and people can watch it for 24 hours. So it is indeed recorded content.
Right.
However, I loop that in with live video. And the reason I do that is because it's such a great platform, whether you're using Snapchat or Instagram stories or your Facebook. I think there's a story feature on Facebook. I think there's a story feature in Messenger. Personally, I think the only ones worth using are Snapchat or Instagram stories. In fact, I don't even use Snapchat anymore. That's where I really cut my teeth on the micro video content. But that is a great place for fluff. It's a great place to promote what you're doing, and it's a great place for fluff in humanizing yourself and letting people get to know you. So I'm constantly saying, one of my little taglines is fluff sells. And in my grammar school podcast for Instagram marketers, I talk about the power of using fluff. And on my Entrepreneur Live video podcast, I also talk about the power of using fluff. But I don't do fluff like on Facebook Live. I don't do fluff on YouTube, and I don't do fluff on Periscope. I do fluff on either Snapchat or Instagram stories. And the reason why I do that is because they both Snapchat, less so Snapchat these days. So let's just talk about Instagram stories. Instagram stories is going to get you a lot of exposure, a lot of exposure. If you use it regularly, several times a day, and you always are adding content, it's going to get you a lot of exposure with new people and people in your crowd. And it's a way for you to kind of cut loose. Sometimes you can be professional, and sometimes you can just play and have, silly time. So fluff is the silly time. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what I did. This is where I learned that fluff sells. Okay. I was on Snapchat, and when I got on Snapchat for the first time, it was about 2.5 years ago. I did not know how to use Snapchat. I went into the app and I'm like, my head's going to explode. I don't know how to use this app. There's no instructions. It's very counterintuitive. It's seemingly counterintuitive. It's actually very intuitive once you start playing with it. It's like all of a sudden the bells just start going off, the light bulbs. It's like, wow, this is awesome. It really is a tremendous platform. So in order to teach myself Snapchat though, on day one, I created a Snapchat daily tip, and I grew this huge audience over the course of, I think I did 469 days before I finally quit this thing. In a row, I did a tip every single day for 469 days. And I had this regular audience that was tuning in every day for the tip. And I would mix in with the tip fluff. And so during this time, this 2.5 years ago, during this time, I was building my Slam Dunk studio. Folks, I call my studio and my digital products the Slam Dunk Studio. I call my studio a Slam Dunk Studio. So that's what it's called. So every day I was building the studio, and I was getting boxes coming from Amazon constantly. And so part of my shtick, part of my kind of comedy routine was to act like this $500 mixer wasn't what I really wanted when I ordered it from Amazon. It was the packaging.
Right.
It was the bubbles, the air bubbles.
Right.
And so I walk around the house because my feet get cold. I like to wear sandals though. So I walk around my house when I don't go outdoors with socks and sandals on, which is kind of a fashion faux pas, right? So what I would do is I would take those bubbles and stick them on. I would tell people, I got some bubbles. Look at this mixer over here. You don't care about that. Look, I got bubbles. And I would throw the bubbles on the ground. I would record this whole thing. I'd throw the bubbles on the ground and I'd stomp on them. And I was like, yeah, you got to free the bubbles. You can't let the air stay trapped in the bubbles. You know, it's inhumane to let the air stay in these bubbles. You got to free it. And so it became a thing. And people started sending me, they would be like, hey, they would send me private messages and they would be like, hey, Todd, I got some bubbles. And they'd point the camera down at their feet and they'd have the sandals with the socks on and they'd stomp their bubbles. And they're like, I was just thinking about you today when these came in. I hope you're having a great day. That's connecting with people. People are thinking about me when they're opening a package because of this routine I was doing.
Yeah.
It's fluff. It has nothing to do with selling Slam Dunk Studio. It has nothing to do with you hiring me as a coach. It has everything to do with you just connecting with me on a juvenile, fun level that is doesn't hurt anybody, right? It's just laughs, it's just giggles, it's just silly stuff.
So what you're saying is, depending on the platform, like a Snapchat or an Instagram stories, certain kinds of behavior is more cool, but it's also very relevant because people are connecting with you on the more humane level, and that's very important, whether it's you're sharing something more entertaining or funny or you know, like a gag. I don't know what I was going to say there, why I said that, but it gives you more latitude, and it's okay, even though you're maybe, you know, in more serious in other ways when you're live streaming like we are now, as compared to, you know, going on to those platforms. So, well,
and it breaks up the serious content.
Yes.
Like if, you know, it breaks it up. Like if I'm going to talk about the Slam Dunk Studio all the time, over time, people get kind of tired of it. But if they're going to, you know, if I mix in some cool, fun stuff, maybe some opinionated pieces that, like, I avoid politics, but like, and I'll talk about the Coke Pepsi here in a second as an opinionated thing, but, you know, it mixes it up and people are, you know, they're thinking, what's Todd up to today? Yeah, I know he's doing a studio, but I also know that he likes to rant about, you know, when he goes to a restaurant and he has to order a Pepsi instead of a Coke, or he's going to stomp his bubbles, or he's going to take me on a craft beer journey when he goes and buys some craft beer at a, you know, it has to drive 3 hours to get this one special can of beer, and which is ridiculous, right? But, you know, people can relate to these desires and hunts and rants and whatever it is the content is, and it makes it for an entertaining experience. And then, of course, blended in is, hey, I'm working on this studio, I've got a product coming, I've got a podcast. And people just, they either like me or they hate me, or they, you know, if you were doing it, they're going to like you or they're going to hate you or whatever. But the Coke Pepsi thing, it works for every time. Every time. I usually have a few months in between, but I will do, you know, I'll go on a rant and I'll just talk about how awful Pepsi is. And no one ever ordered a Pepsi and the waiter said, I'm sorry, sir, but we only serve Coke. That's like never been uttered in the history of humanity. Yeah. And a few Pepsi people will reach out and say, you know, I do prefer Pepsi, but that's cool. I enjoyed your rant. And then the people that are on my side, I get so much feedback on the Coke versus Pepsi rant. Yeah. And that's what you want, feedback. You want to hear from people. It starts conversations.
Mm-hmm. So on I'm going to shift gears for a second. On a more practical side, I've been trying to, so for example, use Instagram itself as a means to help promote my videos on YouTube. So I'm just, you know, cutting out a clip of my video and just tossing it up there. And, you know, although I've gained a certain number of followers, it's just not the same thing. I'm just wondering how, like, you know, I've seen some people go on Instagram stories, you know, how would you use live streaming to let people know about your body of work that's out there in addition? You know, I don't want to do it like it's just like I'm spamming or just promoting, and I feel you know, I'm sharing that I just released a video, but maybe, you know, it should be more about sharing and talking about a lesson for them. It's not about me having released. It should be about the community and how I'm serving them with the product, right?
Well, the answer is going to depend on the platform. So if you're doing a live video and you want to promote your YouTube channel where you've got your evergreen, you know, your deep dives into Camtasia or any other topics that you're taking on. I'm looking at my screen on the laptop because I'm in your live video at YouTube, and you've got this gorgeous graphic and the scroll at the bottom, and I love all that. But what you could do is you could have some slides loaded in, full screen slides that like maybe promote a video that you did that week, and you could bring the slide up for 10 seconds and talk about it and take it off. If you're doing it on like, I don't know if you saw it, folks, anybody that's in the audience today, if you want to see a great video, if I can pat myself on the back, I did a little promotion for the video today with Gord on my Instagram stories at Todd.LIVE. Very easy to find. And Gord, what I did was you sent me a JPEG format of the photo that you took. Yeah, the thumbnail.
Yeah.
So what I did was I recorded a 15-second clip with my phone. I have 2 apps that I use. Well, actually, I only used one app today. I used Video Shop. I loaded that video from my camera roll right into Video Shop. I slapped your JPEG right onto the screen and resized it, put it at the bottom. And I talked about how I was going to be on your video, and it had the little thumbnail down at the bottom kind of floating on the screen. And I'm adding some context to it. So they're not just seeing the picture without me talking. They're hearing me saying, hey, I'm going on with my friend Gord. I met him at Vid Summit. We're going to have a great time. 1 o'clock. I think I said 12:30, but 1 o'clock on YouTube. I hope you guys can come. We're going to be talking about live video and Instagram. So, kind of a tease, kind of an ad, kind of a thing, 15 seconds, but it's in the middle of a bunch of fluff. And because I'll have some fluff to go on there later today. But it just depends on the platform, how you're going to promote. But I think on your lives, you have a permanent, maybe a link to your YouTube video down at the bottom. It's not clickable because it's on screen, but you have a URL that's very easily something that they would remember. Actually, for you though, you're only broadcasting to YouTube, so your people are already there. I mean, but maybe you want them to go to Facebook.
I mean, this is one of the things where I kind of, I've thought about the idea of podcasting, but I'm running a YouTube channel, and then I'm thinking about repurposing, and this is where, I wanted to get into the whole idea of, how do I know I'm shifting gears again. What should one do? Should they be looking more to do the live streaming as a dive in first, or live stream to then repurpose part of that for podcasting, or vice versa? And would it depend on the kind of business they're in, or what they're doing? So like, I mean, how do you decide which is the right direction?
There's a ton of variables.
Okay.
And without more information on, to make the question more specific, it would be hard to give some sort of a definite answer, because I think there's a lot of variables.
Okay.
I think it starts with, what is your mission? When I did the Create and Engage live video and podcast, I don't feel like I had, or looking back, I don't feel like I had a real clear why I was doing it. It just, I don't know, it just never felt right. But when I decided to do an Instagram podcast, well, I want to mix. I mean, who wants to listen to me 7 days a week for 15 minutes every day? I mean, they got to have something else to throw in there. So it made sense for me with my live video background to have a 1 day a week where I do an interview. And why not do it live? I have the tech figured out. So it's kind of like was a no-brainer for me. Why not do it live, so that people that are on the podcast on, 6 days a week, maybe they come join me on the live. Maybe they don't. But there's a live component, and that allows the people on the various platforms that watch live to know that there's a podcast component.
Right.
So it goes back to that cross-pollination. I don't know that I would ever do a show where my goal was, it was going to be a live stream and a podcast. And I'll tell you why. Because I think it lacks direction that way. I think it was easy for me to add the live video component when the mission was to do a podcast. And I think it's also makes it a little easier to record for podcasts if your mission is to do a live video first, and you just like the recording for the podcast is kind of like an afterthought,
right?
Because your audience, the content that you're doing in a live video isn't necessarily going to translate well into a podcast, and vice versa. So it's kind of
so go with where the primary intent is, and try to get skilled at that, because I mean, you're at the level now of like you're tri-casting, and then I sit there and wonder, like, how can you possibly serve each audience effectively? And before you answer that, I'm just going to acknowledge, because even me sitting here watching the chat roll, it's kind of hard to balance it and the dialogue. And there's a question here I wanted to share with you from Joe Roderick. Yep. He says,
okay,
when you talk about a podcast, do you mean to put it on Apple's platform, or just in an audio version somewhere online other than iTunes?
Yeah, Joe, you might have joined us late. I did mention this earlier, but I'll mention it again. I'm happy to. When I podcast, I want my podcast because I'm recording with the podcast in mind. I'm recording with the idea, even when I'm live, because I do address the podcast audience during my live videos to let them know that I'm live somewhere else. It kind of teases the fact that I'm live somewhere else, but it also lets them know that if it doesn't seem tailored to the podcast, that's because I was recording it from a live video. And so they kind of get what's going on. But I want my podcast to be everywhere humanly possible. So yes, I'm on Apple, the iTunes store. I'm on Alexa. So if you go into Amazon and you look up Todd.LIVE or you look up Grammar School, it's spelled with an ER. People love to reach out to me and say I spelled grammar wrong. I'm like, dude, you missed the apostrophe. It's a play on the word Instagram. But Grammar School, if you go into, you can go into Amazon, and anybody that's set up to have their podcast go on Alexa, what has to happen is the listener has to go into Amazon, find that podcast, and choose for it to go to their Alexa. And then when they go to their Alexa, they can say, Alexa, play my flash briefs, and whatever you choose the order in Amazon, what you want them to play. If you have 5 different podcasts you're listening to, you choose the order in which they play. And then when you say, Amazon, play my flash briefs, just totally thoughtlessly, it'll say playing your flash briefs, starting with Todd.LIVE, Grammar School. And it goes right into my latest podcast each day. So it's on Amazon, it's on Alexa, or I'm sorry, it's on Amazon, it's on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google. If you're on Google, you're going to be on all the Google devices that are coming out now. I'm on Spotify. I think I'm on iHeartRadio. I want my shows, they don't do well on all these platforms, but I want them there, building a catalog so that if these platforms, even the dead ones, come around, and it doesn't take any work. You set these things up one time, right, and then you never do it again. You don't ever tweak it. You don't do anything.
Yeah, and I think it's so important. I mean, if you're a brand and you're gonna, start to syndicate like that, just the reach that you can get, and with how the podcasting part of things is getting so much more immersive and accessible in our everyday life through these home environment technologies, is just mind-blowing, if you ask me, to be able to just casually get up and speak a few words, and there you are, you're right immersed into the content without having to turn a specific computer on, do this or that. There's like a speaker there waiting to hear you. I mean, it's incredible. This is why, I mean, like you said, you get in the forefront of this kind of, next generation. I mean, it's here now, but the growth be at the leading part of the curve, it's going to be huge.
Yeah. Now, well, Joe followed up. He said thanks, but he didn't know you could get a podcast onto Alexa. Joe, I don't know if you already have a podcast. I'll just throw this in there, Gord, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
I don't know if you already have a podcast, Joe, but it really takes maybe an hour to do it. And the only reason why it takes an hour is because you have to have 3 different sized thumbnails that you have to create the art for. And I'm including that in the hour. But once you have all of the assets in a row, your art pieces, your description, your title, and your RSS link from whatever I use Libsyn as my hosting service for a podcast, and I use the RSS link that Libsyn gives you. You go into Amazon in the developer thing, and it's really, once you log into Amazon, it's like a 15-minute thing, and it takes them about 24 hours to approve your podcast, and then it's on there. Boom, it's there. It's really not hard. And I talk to so many podcasters out there who have big shows and they're not on Alexa because they think it's going to be a real pain in the butt to do it. It's easy. Ross Brand and I got on a Skype one time because he wanted me to help him get through signing up for Alexa. And we did it in less than 20 minutes. It was incredible.
That's awesome.
Over Skype. I just ran him through it on Skype over 20 minutes. It was very simple.
Yeah. And I see Joe mentions here that he has a life coaching course. I mean, that would be, a great kind of thing to share lessons on something like Alexa and make a podcast material out of that.
Absolutely.
Now, okay. So I want to ask about something else, which I'm very keen on, and that's evergreen content. Does the concept for live streaming, like, for example, today, we're focused on a topic of live streaming for small business growth. We're talking about podcasting as well, but I construct and prepare for these shows so that I'm sure we're answering a lot of questions. So I try to, whether my content is pre-recorded or whether it's in a live scenario like this, I still want to have a lot of value to go back to the people that consume the material. Do you consider the evergreen content still rides high even in producing live like this? Because a lot of people you use the live more for conversation and connection, and I get that, in community, but I guess I see it as, well, we can do both. You know what I mean?
You can. I used to sweat it more and really plan out every broadcast, but if I want to broadcast as often as I do, I can't do that. Then it becomes a question between quality versus quantity, and you're moving the lever one way or the other. If you're doing more quantity, then the quality by nature has to not be as good. It just can't be as good if you're doing less quantity and you're really focused on making the show as awesome as it could be. So I had to decide upon a few things, and I went. It's not that I went for quality or quantity over quality. It's right. That I wanted quantity because, for one thing, with podcasting, I started out doing a 1 day a week show for an hour. Right. And let me tell you what, the traction isn't there. It's going to take you forever to get people to where they are thinking about you on a regular basis and coming back to your podcast.
Okay.
I wanted something daily. And what's interesting is I started doing dailies in November, December.
Yeah.
Now I see everybody doing daily. Like everyone I know is doing daily. I spent social media marketing world with Mike Vardy, a friend of mine who is a fellow Canadian, Gord. I think I told you that before. And he has a very successful podcast, The Productivityist. And he's a main stage speaker at Chris Decker's Tropical Think Tank. He speaks all over the world on time management as an entrepreneur and a creator. And he and I become big buddies. We shared a room for traffic and conversion and social media marketing world. And he spent a lot of time talking to me about the daily podcast, and I totally convinced him. And what happened when he goes home? Within 3 weeks of social media marketing world, I don't even think it took that long. It was probably like 3 days. But he texted me. He's like, I've got my daily podcast now.
Oh, awesome.
Because you get the traction. I mean, I'm having 500 downloads a day right now on my grammar school podcast. Now the live video is not nearly as strong. It's probably like 50 downloads a day, which is still good, because I know podcasters that have been doing it for 2 years and have awesome shows and are getting 50 a day, and they've been doing it 2 years. I've been doing these less than 6 months, and I'm getting 500 downloads a day on the Instagram, which is my best podcast yet as far as downloads go.
If I can interrupt, I find
absolutely.
that it's so present for me when I see, almost every time I go to look. I use an app called Castbox on Android, and that's where I subscribe to you and listen to you there. But every time I go to look, the numbers keep rising, and there's more stuff available from Todd than practically anybody. So how I enjoy it is I end up being able to watch a bunch of them at a time, and because they're not too long, it's nice to consume them in that format. And that's why I was going to say to you, is it better, whether we're live streaming that we go or podcasting to go shorter versus longer? Is it better to have more frequent broadcasts and the length doesn't have to be that long? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
If you're doing a combo live stream podcast, I think it just depends on the format. If it's going to be an interview format, I think naturally it's going to be an hour long or so, a half hour. It makes sense for it to be a longer format, because who's going to want to? I mean, if you have Joel Comm or Ross Brand or Owen Video or somebody come on, there's no way you're going to fit in a great show in a half hour. I mean, yeah, it'll be great. Arguably, it still would be great, but I feel like it would just fall short. It just there wouldn't be enough content there. Again, I don't record like fluff. I'm not going to turn fluff into a podcast. There's fluff in my podcast, but there's not fluff episodes. Like it just I mean, I don't know if that went to the heart of your question or not, but sometimes it gets confusing when we back and forth between podcasts and live video, because I think of them so differently, and I treat them differently, even though I use them together.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and I guess you're getting a feel for it as you're evolving and doing more, producing more and more, right? I mean, I'm sure it was different when you started, and I'm just trying to think, maybe you can give advice for someone like me. I'm a small guy, and if I start to do something more, more daily, and I do like a how-to channel, I feel like, well, this isn't going to be about me coming up with a tip a day where I have to show video screens like a micro tutorial. I mean, you can, and there's some people that do an amazing job of that in podcasting and video, or people like Mike Unplugged. I just love the work he does, and I go, well, I haven't figured out what my formula is yet. I mean, I enjoy this style of communicating and trying to share value this way, but I'm not sure, just the thought of committing, like you have to do, multiple podcasts and live streaming every week with the frequency that you do. It's like, there's a little breathing room, right?
Here's one thing to think about. Okay. One of the things that I like about podcasting is I've chosen topics that are not something that has to be released that very day. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when I do my Instagram podcast, I will sit down and I will record a whole month's worth of podcasts in a day or a day and a half. And I'll edit and I'll program, and I record them in a fashion so that the editing is very minimal.
Okay.
And I send them up to Libsyn and I program them. And then so I might spend 2 or 3 days.
Drip them out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then they drip out, and I have the rest of the month to do other stuff. I initially tried to mix, like I wanted every podcast to have a live video component.
Right.
Well, that's going to cut down on the amount that you can create, because you know how difficult it is to go live, all the prep and all the thinking and considerations. And you can't in a sense scale your time
mm-hmm.
to where it makes sense if what you're recording always has to be live.
Yeah.
So
that's right. It's on demand when you're there.
Yeah. So, I ditched the idea of trying to have a podcast show that drops at the same time or right after I do the live video, because then I'm constantly having to go live, and I'm constantly having to drum up. This is another big problem too. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but mm-hmm. I've always found that scheduling guests is a real pain in the butt. And I love having guests come on the show, but, and this is before I got into a calendar app that I use called.
I remember you told me when Calendly saved the day for you.
Oh, it did big time, because I was constantly going back and forth with people about what would work for them. And it was just such a hassle. Yeah. And now I set up Calendly. So I send you a link and you pick a time, and, I have Tuesdays are all the times for my lives.
Yeah.
Everything I do live is on Tuesdays. That's it.
Right.
And, unless it's unannounced, I guess,
sure.
But those are my interview days. And it made life easier, but, I'm trying to simplify things to where, everything we do on planet Earth, everything mankind does is to get as much bang out of whatever effort they're putting into it as they can. That's why the wheel was invented, was to make a task easier. Mm-hmm. They could get more done with the wheel than they could without the wheel. It was less effort with the wheel. It was less time involved, everything. The wheel changed everything. And so I'm trying to do, with podcasting, with live video, I'm trying to make it to where I'm putting out good quality content. It doesn't have to be over-engineered. I'm in mm-hmm. manufacturing. I mentioned that earlier. And people will sometimes say to me, well, your parts could be better. It's like, well, my parts are the best on the planet, and I mm-hmm. guess I could over-engineer them, and then you're going to pay another $70 for the part. So
right.
They're engineered good enough.
Yeah.
So I engineer my podcasts to be good enough. I engineer my live videos to be good enough. And that way I can create more content that's at a level that hopefully is as good or better than anyone out there, but it's not over-engineered. And that way I can get more content out, more topics, more discussions on more platforms, and serve the audience, and just always have something new and fresh going on, instead of, people are waiting around for that over-engineered part. And I started Divorce the Workforce, Create and Engage were way over-engineered. Mm-hmm. They weren't fun to do.
Yeah. It's funny. We're so used to, I think, historically, because of where tech's been at it, and not, it's so simple to execute in many ways now. Of course, it's another thing to get to the level of production quality that you're doing, but once you got there now, you can make it happen quickly. But we've been conditioned over years to think that tech's going to be a battle to be able to manage this and produce it. And you know, if you give yourself a chance, you can overcome those hurdles. And with a little help, you'd be surprised the magic that you can produce. But a lot of people will go, whew, they won't even venture there. It's kind of interesting, I find too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, Gord, you have somebody in the audience. Do you mind if can we hit this one comment?
Yes, V reacts. I'll read the question then.
Go ahead.
Todd. So, can you talk about sponsorship and media kits if you have any knowledge of them? Media kits sound so overwhelming. I guess that's in the context of helping to promote your show or work with sponsors or have some kind of material collateral to represent you, right?
Yeah, I'm assuming they're talking about just getting advertisers. How do you get paid, right? Well, here's the thing. I'm not even actively looking for anyone to sponsor anything that I'm involved in doing. I do work with Telestream, which makes Wirecast and ScreenFlow that I use. And I do work with Switchboard Live. I'm in the beginning stages of my relationships with them, so I don't know where they're going to go. But I'm not truly actively looking for to get paid by, like, I'm doing pre-roll and mid-roll advertisements and things. I'll tell you, when I was at Podcast Movement 2017 in Anaheim, California, it was an awesome show. I actually had dinner at Social Media Marketing World with the guys that run Podcast Movement, and had dinner with them one night. It was awesome. But and I really liked the show, but everybody's running around and a lot of the speakers are talking about how to get, advertisers, and everyone's talking about, oh God, I got to get advertising. I need more listeners and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want any of that. I'm not even interested in that. If it comes my way, I'll deal with it when it happens. Instead, I want to create my own products, and I will promote my own products pre-roll and mid-roll, and on live videos, I'll put my own products on the screen, and I'll talk about my own products instead of somebody else's products that I get a little commission for if I sell it. And that way I have complete control. I keep all my own money. And I'll tell you who does this brilliantly. I have two examples. Cliff Ravenscraft, who, when I first cut my teeth on any of this tech, I took Cliff Ravenscraft's Podcast A to Z course because I was terrified of mixers and microphones and things. I didn't know how to do any of this stuff. So that's where I really got my foundation for doing what I do, was his class. And Cliff, I don't think he ever takes on other people. He does deals where he'll have a company that, if he has a equipment package, and he'll sell the package and he'll collect the money, and then he sends whatever portion that the company gets, and then they fulfill the order. And all he does is move money and talk about his package. That's like the Cliff Ravenscraft package that you can get from, Planet B&H or whatever one of these companies is called.
Right.
So, but he promotes his own courses all the time. He promotes his own, however he's making money on things that he's created, that's what he promotes. And also at Podcast Movement, and Cliff talked about that at Podcast Movement. Also at Podcast Movement, Michael Stelzner from Social Media Examiner was on stage on a panel, and somebody asked him, they must not have known him very well, but somebody asked him, how do you get all your paid advertisers for Social Media Examiner? Well, they don't have any paid advertisers at Social Media Examiner. And he just flat looked at him and said, I don't promote anyone else on Social Media Examiner. I promote Social Media Examiner. He promotes creators that contribute to Social Media Examiner,
right?
But he's not getting paid advertising and slipping in this advertising in everything he does.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real interesting thing, because, the advertisers will come and go, but if you're working for yourself and you're creating whatever it is you're creating, courses or products, then you can have control over how it's sold. You can have control over the message when the message is put out there. You get to keep the money. I totally
agree. I think that's just an awesome approach in it. And just imagine, because we're creating, we have an opportunity to share our message and what we have to sell in our services. And as long as it's done tactfully. And I totally agree. It's people are often, possessed with, seeing the grandeur of the people that have made it big, and think that that's like, their only way to tap into the money or opportunity. But if you're your own creator, wow, I mean, there's nothing better.
Gord, this goes to your point and your question earlier about, being tactful and knowing when to slip it in and all that. People that are consuming your content and you're working your butt off to do it, they're going to be the people that are into Gord, the people that are into Todd.LIVE. they're not going to have a problem if you do a 30-second, like let's say you do a 10-minute video and you want to do a 30 seconds in the middle of it, or I think on a video on YouTube, it probably should be at the beginning or the end, probably the end. But you know, if no one is going to begrudge you of doing that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is a great point, because I forget who it was, the internet marketer that told me this. He said, you're giving so much content and a lot of people that enjoy your content and what you're doing. He said, do you know you're actually doing them a disservice in a way by not having stuff to offer to them, or products you recommend? So even the affiliate marketing stuff or other things that you want to recommend, because they're following you because they believe and they trust in your knowledge and authority, and to help them and influence their buying decisions and products to look at. So it's like, I never thought about it like, oh my God, I always thought about it like I'm being, then I'm going to be salesy if I put that out there. But the reality is people actually want to, once they get to know you as well, they want to learn about, hey, you know, what does Todd use for a microphone, and why does he use, you know, his Apple iPads as opposed to, you know, Android tablets, or, you know,
absolutely,
what kind of LED lights does Todd have in his studio? Because I think he has a killer setup, and people want to know from you. But at first I always thought, well, you know, like, how do I do that tactfully, gracefully? And yeah, I know it is important, but at the same time, I think I've erred over time the opposite way of not sharing more, because people would benefit as well and appreciate it, like you're saying. And I think that's very interesting.
Well, and you can be very tactful in how you do it. You know, like if you build a course, like I'm building the Instagram podcaster course, you know, I can share certain aspects of the course for free, but maybe some of the components that, like the really hard stuff for me to figure out, you have to buy the course for that. So I'm giving people, you know, and people can maybe figure it out on their own, right?
Sure.
Or they could buy the course, but I'm giving them some direction, and nobody's going to, and if, you know what, if anybody does have a problem with it, they're not part of your crowd. Yeah.
Sure. So now can we take the perspective of, I'm a small company, or even I'm the solopreneur, and I don't feel I'm the right person to go on camera. I may feel I'm not charismatic enough or have the personality. What do you think of the concept of solopreneur or a small business using a spokesperson to help them with their message on live? Because do you think to that degree that people are totally missing out opportunity if they don't start to go and do things, you know, live stream and other stuff like that, whether it's to show their organization from a behind the scenes, get to know them, or customer support stuff, Q&As. Like, there's so many opportunities, and some people just may be like, I don't think we have somebody here that can do that. You know what I mean? Because what do you say to those people that may feel stuck and are considering?
Well, I mean, it kind of goes down to one, you have to get over the fear of going live. Okay. You have to realize that none of us are going to appeal to the whole world. There's going to be people that hate Todd.LIVE, and there's going to be people that love Todd.LIVE. And I just need to focus on being myself. So the people that love me as I am find me and stick with me. And the people that hate me, they just move on, hopefully. And they don't even grumble. They just move on. It's fine.
Yeah.
But everybody on this planet has an audience out there who's going to be interested in them as a human being and their message, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So you have to get started. Now, small business, solopreneur, first of all, let's just take these one at a time. Small business. I think it's totally terrible for for an owner of a small business to have somebody else be the face of their business, because they are their small business. They're the person that came up with the idea. They're the person that has the passion for doing what it is they're doing. If they have any passion in it, maybe they hate what they're doing now. I don't know. But, they're the people they're the individual. Like, I have a business. I have an online business. I don't do really any live video or social media for it. I should, but I don't. But I don't have to, for reasons we don't need to go into now. I just don't have to. But I would never dream of hiring somebody to do it, because it's me. I've poured my heart and soul into this business, and maybe I'm not the most charismatic person for that particular business, but who is going to be, and if you find that person, are they going to be with you until the business is gone? No, they might move on. So I just think that the people behind the business should be the ones doing it.
I totally agree. And I'll just to make an analogy.
Yeah.
I mean, when I knew I wanted to help people to succeed with video and get their message out there, and I was hiding behind the camera originally in my first year plus of working and creating video, doing whiteboard sketches and PowerPoint slide videos and voiceover, and never putting myself on camera, I said, well, how am I going to connect with the people at another level to do what I want to do? And I think, we just have to, get over it and realize that we're going to get better the more we do it, and accept that. So I'm going to have to, smash through that wall of whatever I'm resisting in order to, like you said, it's your business. Why wouldn't you want to be out there? Like, why is it okay that you can be in your retail establishment or on the phone or whatever, but because the camera light goes on,
well,
I'm hung up.
Get the same objections every time. I'm not trained to be in front of the camera.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would say. No one's interested. I wouldn't have content for every day. All these lame, they're not, I don't want to, they are lame.
They're excuses for us to stay with our story that we've attached to for not stepping up, really.
Yeah. The only reason why they're not lame is just because they're so common. It's just the natural human reaction. Yeah. But once you break through to the other side, you look back and you think, my goodness, how silly was I? Because it's not a big deal. I mean, it's just not a big deal. And this is where tech is taking us, folks. Yes. So, you might not do it. Let's say you own a sporting goods store, an independent sporting goods store, and you're just terrified. You don't want to do it. You're scared. You're whatever. No one's going to watch. No one's going to. That's ridiculous. And what's going to happen is at sometime during your life, somebody else is going to come down on the corner and they're going to open their sporting goods store. And guess what? They're going to be doing this. And then you're not going to be. And it's going to be a remarkable difference between the kind of traction that they get and the kind of traction you get. So you can fight it, or you can just jump in and learn to swim. And I don't believe that there's a human on this planet, absent any sort of mental disabilities, that would be have some sort of a reason not to do it. Even physical disability. I follow people that have significant physical disabilities that are crushing it with video and social, and they have things to be worried about and scared about. And are people going to look at, one person I follow, he's got some sort of a disability, and his dental work is very, very bad because of the illness that he has. Right. And he doesn't mind smiling on camera. And it's like, if he can overcome his obstacles, why can't somebody who doesn't even have anything close to that, other than I wasn't trained to be on the camera and I don't know what I would say? I mean, it's kind of silly.
And I think those kind of people are incredible inspirations. And I agree with you. When I watch people that have the courage, so it's about having the courage and stepping up and getting over whatever it is you're going to resist. And you'd be surprised, now, I still get anxious and but I know I need to do this because I do enjoy it. After the fact, I look back, assuming I didn't have some kind of like bomb at the beginning or whatever, and I feel great because there's so much more that we can do to bring to people and to share that this kind of forum affords for us to do. And I think that's so powerful. And like you said, that was like such a great point, was that if you don't do it, because now it's getting so easy with the tech, the next guy, your competition, is going to be doing it soon enough, and you'll just lose out because of excuses. And so, I mean, I don't mean to sound, crass or anything, but I like that was part of pushing me to step up, was so that, I can get my opportunity to be recognized and appreciated and for people to get to know me. Right. So that, because I like Joe, I want to produce my courses and get them out there. And similarly, there's kind of a little bit of resistance there to get that stuff out there. And that's just another dimension to the same thing.
Yeah. And you just have to get over it. It's really not a big deal. it's just where things are going, and you can either miss out or not. I mean, Gord, you and we're older. What I find interesting is that a lot of the people in live video and social media and really trying to push it in a business sense. I mean, I know there's a lot of young people out there doing it, millennials and whatnot, but there's a lot of people our age doing it, and, which I think is really cool.
I do too.
And at some point we're going to see a lot of the young people starting to embrace it, and all of a sudden it's really going to be a lot of competition. So this is a great time, particularly if you're middle-aged, to be doing this sort of a thing. There's a lot of middle-aged people out there who, I mean, I have people all over the world that have reached out to me through Snapchat, through Instagram, through whatever platforms I'm using, to tell me that, I mean, I had one guy who's probably like half my age. He's probably like 22 years old or something like that. And he's Australian, and he lives out in rural Australia somewhere. And his name is Josh. And one day when I was doing my Snapchat tips, this is the first instance I realized the power of this. He sent me a private video message, and he goes, Todd, I just wanted to do a shout out. You know, I'm down here in Australia, and I start every morning with my favorite cup of coffee and your Snapchat tip. It makes my day.
That's awesome.
And it really made me think about the power of what I'm doing here, that I'm reaching a guy in Australia who I would have no chance of ever meeting. If I lived another 1,000 years, I probably wouldn't run into this guy on the street. And I'm making his day with a Snapchat.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So, you know, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, I liked a few comments that have been coming through here to share with everyone. And Doug Wolf says, video takes courage and purpose. And Joe says, I think it's fantastic to see the 40-plus crowd to be doing this, which, you know, I totally agree. I call it the second chapter of life, 40-plus. And, you know, V reacts, it's never too late to start. And, you know, 2018 is the year to do so, she says. And yeah, Joe says I'm often at least twice the age of some of the people viewing the videos. And you know what? I have a point. Sure,
I do have a point to add in here real quick.
Go ahead.
My mom is older, right? My mom is in her mid 60s. And she's always, and her friends, they always talk about how lonely life is in the 60s, and the kids have moved out. Maybe somebody's lost their spouse or whatever. And I've told my mom, you know, live video and podcasting could be the answer. And people my age, like for me, I'm not worried at all that in my 70s, if I outlive my wife or my kids have moved on or whatever, that I'm somehow going to be just devastatingly lonely, because I've got this whole world on the internet that doesn't include my children or my wife, full of creators like you and Ross Brand and Professor Nez and Jenny, Coach Jenny, and Owen Video. And I have all these people all over the world I'm making connections with that I see online almost every day in some capacity or another. And they see me too. And it's a whole community. And so, I mean, look, even if you're not doing this as a business reason, you could do this as just having your own community and another segment of life that's enriching and enlightening and powerful and fun. And I mean,
it doesn't have to be for business, just sharing your message and engaging with other people and the opportunity to meet people around the world. Like, I just love it when I look at my videos and I go to see, oh, look, there's people, you know, in India, Australia, US, Canada. It's really cool to see that, and then to see them engage in comments and being able to connect with them. I just think it's so cool. And Joe says here, I'm nearly 50, first publishing books and now video. And, you know, Joe, I'm 58, and Todd, how many years young are you?
I'm 47. 48 in October.
You're the youngster in the house today. Actually, V Reacts says I think I saw above, she's in her 30s. And I was just going to add, like, earlier this week, I was on Dusty Porter's podcast and live stream, and he's 31, and he finds it, you know, so interesting and fascinating. And he says, you know, the age thing it's just a number. Like, we all have something special and unique and authentic about ourselves to share. And that's why, you know, that's part of the reason why I'm really inspired, because I want to see that the 40-plus generation, we'll call it second chapter of life, people don't give up on doing that, because I sort of played small for a long while till I started to believe that I was creative. And now I say, oh my God, took me whatever for me to get going and inspired. Imagine all the people out there that aren't doing this for God knows what number of reasons, and they can probably get over it and really, make a difference. We have Professor Nez joined us too today.
Yeah, I saw that. I love Nez. The older you get, the more you have to share as well, I think.
Yes, I totally agree, and I think the younger people find it fascinating too to learn our perspective. And one of the things I shared on Dusty's podcast was I look at it as, we can have mentors that are older than us, mentors that are younger than us, in different generations, and I think that's so important to be able to appreciate different perspective. And because we all grow up differently and we're shaped, a lot of our behaviors and beliefs are shaped young, and it was totally different times for different generations. And so I'm grateful that participating here in live stream and through these communities, people reach out to you and you get to meet them at all different age groups, right?
Gord, you and I and a lot of the audience that's on your video today, we have all lived through. I mean, I was 13 years old in 1983 when we got an Apple IIe, and we were one of the first people in the entire town to have a computer in our house. Wow. So we lived through that. We lived through the beginning of the internet when AOL was sending us the floppy disks every single day, free 40 hours on AOL if you sign up, and first getting online, and chat rooms were all the rage, and it would take an hour to download a picture of a satellite image of the Earth. And we've come all this way, you and I and some of your audience, to where everything, I mean, you could make $1 million on a cell phone in a coffee shop with no inventory and just a message.
Yeah.
If now that might be, one in a million,
yeah.
But these things are becoming more and more possible because of the phone, the smartphone.
Yes, the phone has changed everything. The game. And I've just given your analogy there with the picture. I'm going to sort of one up you here. When I was in high school, you literally, when we got screens, or we had cards where you'd have to key in the punch cards to get the program in, and then the next day I remember the first class on programming was to say print whatever message you wanted, and we'd have to get from the Board of Education a physical paper output dropped at our school to then see it, tear it off for the classes and see your output. I mean, that's how primitive it was in my upbringing, and that's what I'm saying.
And part of my point too is that because you and I and some of your audience today have lived through how the technology, when it comes to internet, computers, and communication, has evolved quickly, I think it's very easy for us to embrace it. I do think there's still a big fear factor of the video portion at this point, but I think that those of us willing to do it and to teach people our own age and the younger generation, there's just tremendous opportunity, because the younger, my kids both have. I have a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old, and my 9-year-old got he got a phone for Christmas. He's 9 years old. He's got a phone. He's got internet. He's got, he doesn't really use it much. He knows how to use it. But we control it. But the point is that these things are happening, and they were born into this. And I think a lot of these people that are younger, high school age and college age, don't quite grasp the power that they're holding in their hand, because they practically were born with it, where we
have a different appreciation in that context. We have seen this happen before our very eyes. Yeah, that's very true. Professor Nez asked us, do you think everyone should go live? We kind of talked a bit about that earlier, but do you want to respond again?
Sure. I don't think that there's a reason why anybody, I think that somebody who maybe has a mental disability that would prohibit them from really putting out content that made sense for people to watch, I think they could draw more negative attention than positive, depending on what the situation was. But I think that no physical disability, I think no excuses or hangups should stop anybody from getting online and trying it out. I think there's an audience for everybody out there. And even, I guess, people with certain other mental disabilities. I just think that could be more of a negative than a positive for some people. But because the internet is a cruel place. But
I was just going to say, how do you respond? Have you ever had any nasty experiences with trolls or otherwise that made you feel otherwise or affect your determination?
No, I haven't had any trolls. I think I did tick one guy off. I didn't realize that he was a listener of one of my podcasts, and he decided to start tagging me in his content on Instagram, and it had nothing to do with me or anything I was doing. And I blocked him, and so he decided to go and slam me with a couple of feedbacks. He gave me 2 negative feedbacks on one of my podcasts when it was new, just to be spiteful. I know it was him because of the way they were worded and what was said, but aside from, he seems to have disappeared. I mean, I didn't really address him, and I didn't make a big deal about it. It is what it is, but supposedly when you start getting a few trolls that are hating on you, that means you're succeeding. So
when I've had them, Todd, I learned that it's best not to engage with them and just let them be. And I don't feel it's worth giving them my energy, because if I do and they see that they're affecting me, then they just continue. So anyways, I mean, you know, they have their liberty and their freedom and the ease of access, and you know, it's just incredible. And I've had to develop more of a thick skin, but it's taken time for sure.
Hey, Gord, I just want to throw this in there. Sure. I love your audience. I mean, you've had a solid 13 to 15 people for a while now, and they're commenting and having fun, and they're talking to each other, which is always the good sign of a strong live broadcast, when people in the audience are actually conversing amongst themselves while the broadcast is going. So you've got terrific people here on your show.
Great. Well, thank you, Todd. We have a great question here from Doug Wolf. Because of your manufacturing background, you'll be able to dig into this one. There's a big movement in lean manufacturing where every employee learns to self-broadcast. They have job autonomy to fix what's broke, just have to shoot 1 minute before or after. Incredible cultures, he's saying. So how do you see like that you know, the use of self-broadcast? That almost means like live. I guess this is like using it within, you know, the organization, even as a communication tool.
Yeah, I've never heard of that happening. Honestly, I don't even know that I have an answer to that question.
Well, maybe if Doug wants to chime in and share a little more on that, so help us get clarity, then we can address
the manufacturing that I do. I am in manufacturing. I don't do the manufacturing myself. I'm not an engineer, and I didn't grow up learning any of that. I got into manufacturing kind of on a mistake or just a timing thing, but I bought something for, I'm in the firearms industry, but I don't sell guns. But I got into guns. I wanted to learn how to shoot a shotgun, and I bought an aftermarket part. There's a little handle on the side of the shotgun that's kind of small, and I bought an oversized handle, and the handle wasn't any good. And so I looked to see if anybody else made a handle, and no one else made a better handle. So I started going to machine shops here in Orange County, trying to find somebody to make, just me and a couple buddies, one of these handles. The first thing I ran into was, how many do you want to make? And I said, well, 5 or 10 for me and my buddies. And they said, well, the reverse engineering and all the time involved, you're going to spend, it'll be $500 a handle. Yeah. And I had an eBay background and an Amazon background, and I had done some other things on the internet. I had never built a website though, and I'd never paid anyone to build me a website to that point. And I told the manufacturer, I said, well, if I buy 1,000 of them, what does that do to the number? And he calculated it out, and he's like, well, that makes them $12 a piece. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I can sell this part for $70. I'm going to throw up a website. I'll make 1,000 of them at $12 a piece. So it's a $12,000 order. I'll throw up a website and we'll see if we can sell them. And that was 10 years ago, and my business still runs. I don't ever name the business online. People can figure it out if they really want to search it down. But that changed my life. I now have 40 some parts that are made for my business, and it got me into manufacturing. But the shops that I use are small. They're like 4 or 5 employees. So it's not like if I was running, if I was, the guy that ran a major manufacturing operation, and there's people all over a giant 70-acre campus, maybe communicating through live video with somebody across the way. I don't know if that's what the gist of it is.
I think Doug's chimed in and explained that it's all about process improvement. So they actually record something and it's shared, I believe he said, like the next day or next morning. So it's like a form of, I guess, nothing's better than seeing the live experience and to be able to show and communicate it, and then it's addressed after, and they've done, it said a team of 100 is on track to have produced 5,000 videos in a 2-year period. So it's just amazing. Like the power is there now to do this kind of thing. So imagine with, when we say live streaming or whatever, I mean, there could be forums where companies deal with support or Q&As and start to get more public with the way they allow people access. I mean, if it's one thing I'm very frustrated with is only being able to go to sites and that I have to go search through a library to find a solution to a problem or whatever. And, they have live chats. That's an improvement. Well, who knows? Maybe things go to another level. I mean, just it'll be interesting to see how it all evolves competitively for how people are served through live streaming. And I think we're still yet to see all kinds of things that are to come.
I think that it's a very interesting idea. I've never ever given it any thought. The first thing that because I'm a lawyer too, and the first thing I think about is all the litigation that is in corporate world and in anything that's got a structure.
Yeah.
And documenting things in live videos, there's probably a lot of things people wouldn't want to talk about in live videos because that's discoverable. So let's say you have a plant and you have people discussing problems, like maybe there's somewhere and they're filming it and they're talking about it. Well, now that's discoverable. If there's a law, like something busts and somebody gets hurt, now there's a lawyer coming in and wanting to sue. Now there's a record of that. So I know that, not that the company wouldn't have records anyway, but they're setting themselves up to lose lawsuits if they're recording everything. It's kind of like, if you think about it, it's kind of like cameras on dashboards and on police uniforms. The police don't like that because it doesn't allow them to do their job because they've got people that are analyzing these videos who have no idea what it's like to be a police officer when they walk into a crowd of angry people. And when they have to pull their nightstick out and hit someone with it, they've got somebody who's going to analyze that video from a perspective that that person's never been in a situation like that, know how scary it is, and what's an appropriate
and having to
reaction.
split second respond in the process too. Yeah,
I could see video being something that a lot of people wouldn't want in their corporate or manufacturing environment.
Yeah, that's so true. But Todd, maybe that's a whole new area of law that might recircle for you, this whole aspect of live and where you've focused, in what you're doing now, because you can see both sides. I'm sure it's interesting topics for Todd in the future.
Well, we've got Mitch Jackson out there. He's crushing it as an attorney in the live stream and social space, taking on these sorts of things as they come about. He's probably one of the leading attorneys in the country on live video and social media as an attorney, which I think is, I could do that. Yeah. But I don't even want to practice law. I just want nothing. I want nothing to do with it. I'm a recovering attorney.
Yeah. I was just curious because I always think of, the mind goes to thinking about opportunities, right? And
absolutely.
So Todd, you have a YouTube channel and you TriCast, and I've heard you even talk about quadcasting possibly soon. What are your plans for YouTube live streaming as you go forward? And you also have another podcast you're bringing out. So can you sort of lay out the landscape for us to know like what's laying ahead for Todd and how you juggle it all, or is anything going to have to sacrifice, or can you squeeze that all in?
Well, yeah, I'm trying to figure it out. I am, there's so many platforms that you can be on these days and so many things to do. And I do all my own work. I don't have any help whatsoever on any of my content creation or management of any of my channels at this point. And I don't know when I will or if I will or what, but I'm really focused on Instagram. I'm really focused on, you go to my YouTube channel, it might not look like I'm focused on it with only 200 and some followers, but I've just recently redone my artwork and I've been working on my thumbnails and trying to come up with my theming and how I'm going to do it. But I'm going to be taking on YouTube big time through the end of this year and next year.
Awesome.
Instagram, my website, email marketing. I'm really writing a lot of good emails. If you want to go to Todd.LIVE and subscribe.
I was going to say, I think your emails are outstanding. You're
Oh,
doing
well,
a great
thank you.
job in storytelling. I really enjoy. I want to read them right through. Some of them are lengthy, but it's nicely spaced, and there's a really good message. And I just think you're doing a great job. I'm
Well,
learning
thank you.
from Todd there, because I haven't figured that stuff out. And it's interesting being the one man band on a lot of things is an interesting challenge. And when I see people like you firing on cylinders like this, doing multiple live podcasts and then live streaming on top of it, and when you think about it, wearing that entrepreneurial hat in the digital space can be very overwhelming, but at the same time we're learning about how to get our processes to be dialed in, and because of the fact that we work in the digital space, you have the ability to pivot and change things up and adjust, and so you have a new podcast coming. And what inspired that?
Yeah, well, that's going to be called, and I don't know when that's going to start exactly. I thought it would start sooner than it has, but that's going to be called Digital Dojo Live, and it's going to be a live video broadcast on Instagram only, and I'll record it for a podcast. And I put it, it's not going to be daily; it'll be almost daily, but it'll be a place for rants and talks and chats and things I observe, like if Owen, my good friend, one of my favorite creators out there, folks, if you are looking for interesting, entertaining people who are just crushing it, Owen Video is one of my favorite people. Owen, he does, and he has a lot of really good, he's kind of pivoted a little bit into this newsworthy content. And, Digital Dojo will be the kind of place where I might comment. I might do an episode where all I'm doing is talking about how Owen's video made me feel, or what made me think about. Or maybe I saw something from Gary Vaynerchuk or Carlos Gill or from you, Gord, or whatever.
Right.
And kind of a place for me to just kind of look, I love creating content that I don't have to spend hours preparing for. And I try to make it fun and entertaining, but yet thoughtful and thought-provoking. And that's what I think of as Digital Dojo Live. In fact, if I were to point to any creator out there as who might be, if he's not really an inspiration for this, but he kind of does this in his own way,
right,
is Brian Fanzo. He does a lot of podcasting and talking where he sees things out there that other digital creators are doing, or he sees trends and he comments on them, and he provides perspective and thoughts and whatever. And you never know what you're going to get from Brian. And that's kind of what I want Digital Dojo to be. Is you never know what you're going to get. And of course, it's going to have a live component on Instagram at Todd.LIVE, not anywhere else.
Right.
And the podcast. But as far as keeping up the pace, I just like creating content. I like the feedback I get on my content. I mean, I had a guy say he snorted Coke witch shooting out his nose. He laughed so hard last week. Is that
the Granny Potty Mouth episode? I love that.
I had some reactions like that, but I'll tell you, Gord, I was doing one where I was doing on Grammar School. I was talking about the feature where you search for a location, and you can look up all sorts of content from a location. And so I used my hometown in Huntington, West Virginia as the location, and I go in there, and I figure your show is G-rated, so I won't say the word, but I go in there and there's a business in there that makes coffee mugs and plates and stuff and lots of F-bombs and things. But they had this coffee mug that had a 4-letter word that starts with a T that people often use for female anatomy. And it said that word and then waffle. And I had never heard of that. It's like, what is this? And I'm like, this is the kind of crap that's being pumped out of my hometown.
Right.
And I went into this whole tirade. My hometown's actually plagued with heroin right now.
Right.
And I went in with a town full of people on heroin, this kind of stuff probably sells really well. And I just went on this whole rant, and it became a very popular episode, and I got a lot of feedback. And people said, this one guy said he was driving his car and he took a sip of his Coke, and when he heard me say this word that was on this coffee mug for the first time, he said he almost wrecked his car. And, I just I don't want to have that kind of reaction. I don't want anyone wrecking their car listening to me, but I like that it's informative, yet fun and entertaining and lighthearted. Yeah. And it's that way because I don't put a lot of planning behind it. I just roll with me as a person, spouting off whatever I'm going to talk about, and Digital Dojo Live will be that kind of thing.
Well, that sounds awesome. And the Entrepreneur Live video show, Can you just give us share how?
All things live video, all things live video. A lot of encouragement to get you out there and doing it, ways to think about it, ways to get over hurdles. These shows, folks, are 5 to 15 minutes long. So every once in a while they go a little longer. The interviews are always about an hour, and the interviews fall on Wednesday. But it's just, it's just a place for me to talk about live video, help establish some authority, maybe generate some new friends. And I hate to call anybody a fan, but I have been at conventions where people acted like they were a big fan and just were like, "Oh my God, it's Todd.LIVE." And it's like, let's convert you from a fan to a friend real quick. Cause I don't like calling anybody fans. I want all these people to be my friends, but the responses that I get from people, sometimes it's few and far between, and sometimes it's often, depending on the episode. But I mean, I just love knowing that I've entertained or educated somebody on it, and actually the podcast goes out. I don't even know who I'm entertaining or educating. And it might be a week later, somebody said, last week I heard that show and it was so funny. And it's like, wow, what was I doing when you were listening to that show? It just makes me think about the impact you have on the world. We all have on the world when we put content out there and we let it stay, and people stumble upon it whenever they do. And you don't know who you're impacting and when. It's awesome. It's an awesome feeling.
Well, that sounds awesome. So, where can everybody go to find you? I mean, you're called Todd.LIVE, self-proclaimed. Yes. So that
Todd.LIVE, that real briefly, that goes to a point we were talking about earlier, and I meant to mention this. When you are trying to have a presence in all these places and it's difficult for people to find you, it's best if you can use whatever name you're using everywhere. Right. So if you go to Facebook in the top bar and type in Todd.LIVE, you'll find my page. If you do that at YouTube, you'll find my page. Instagram, you'll find my page. Type it in the search bar on Google, you'll find my website. Yeah. So you try to have your name everywhere. And this actually, the point you were making was, how do you do it in a live video so people know? And one thing I used to do, Gord, this is a total aside while we're closing up, but I used to have all the symbols, all the logos from all the different social media platforms on the screen. And then that would say at Todd.LIVE. And that would let people know, okay, he's on Snapchat, he's on YouTube, he's on Instagram, even though it's not technically at Todd.LIVE on all those places. If you search for it on any of those platforms, you're going to find it. And the easier you can make your name, I mean, like, you don't want to
makes a big difference. I couldn't get my handle on one, and it was actually because I did have it, and I'm still trying. I've tried multiple times to get response from Twitter to fix it, and no one responds. I ask over and over again, trying to tell them, it's me. Can you help me?
Yeah.
And it's just like, you're lost in the digital ether, right?
If you do the password fetch kind of thing, you just have to have access to the email that you did when you set it up, and maybe you don't have that.
Exactly. But I know it is me. So, but,
hey, I want to thank, I don't know if there's two, Joe Roderick and Jose Medina subscribed to my channel while we've been on the show today. So I want to thank them for doing that. That means a lot to me. I hope I provide you content that you're looking for and that adds value to your life.
Yeah, I suggest everyone, sign up for subscribe to Todd's podcasts, and he does live streaming on YouTube as well and Facebook. And I mean, you can find Todd with new content literally every day, which is just spectacular. And so, I commend you on that effort, Todd.
I have a show on my YouTube that I've only done twice called Grammar School Show and Tell, which is like a live video component of the Grammar School show. Yeah. Where I put my phone on the screen and teach people Instagram tricks. And when I do that show, I put the counter from YouTube on the screen. So if I gain a subscriber, I give them some cowbell. So since they subscribed.
All right.
Okay, a little bit of cowbell.
That's what I call recognition.
Yeah, little bit of cowbell never hurts anyone's live video.
That's awesome. Okay, well, thank you again, Todd, and it was a pleasure. And I look forward to seeing more stuff to come from you, and enjoy. And I look forward to someday being on your show
soon, my friend. And thank you so much, Gord. Your channel, since I've gotten talking to you over the last couple of weeks, your channel has been such an inspiration already. As I kick in my YouTube into the fast lane, hopefully, I'm going to be probably swamping you with questions.
I'm all there for you anytime.
But
happy to help. I'm looking forward to you cranking it up on YouTube, because I can see, like, what's interesting is I see that, you know, your emphasis is in areas where I'm exploring now and starting to experience, and where I've focused is where you're going to be shifting a little more focus to. So I'm sure we can help each other a lot. And I'm
soundboard
excited
for each
that.
other, my friend. Absolutely.
Yeah, and thank you everybody in chat, and those of you that are still here. It's been a pleasure and great conversation in there. And thanks Mike and Joe and Crypto Cruising. I can see there Doug Wolf and Red Rocket Cells. That's Cricket. Nice to see you all, and thank you everyone. And we'll see you again soon with another broadcast. Cheers.
Echo all that. Take care.
Yeah.